Okay, guys, this is my third writing. Love. I have been running this one around the faculty of my mind daily now for over a year. To start off, let me just say that of course love is a good thing. Who wants hate over love? Okay, very simple, yes? Like all things that get thrown around with so much lightheartedness and ease, the question is, could this be a backdoor to our own enslavement and demise? Love, the four-letter word that gets thrown around so carelessly. I have heard many throughout my life use this word to describe their feelings toward a material object. And from the beginning, let me state that I am guilty of this as well. However, now becoming fully aware and being present in the moment, I have made it a choice to not misuse this word again, nor throw it around recklessly. Okay, let's get started. I hear people constantly stating in moments of excitement, I love my car. I love whatever TV show, movie, celebrity, etc. I love this place, a restaurant, a venue. Okay, we get the point, but why is this a big deal? It's just an expression, you say. We all know there are different types of love. You are just splitting hairs. You may accuse me of this, but I would ask that you join me in some critical thinking on the matter, as the devil is in the details. Most people will tell their children they love them. Some families throw that phrase around more often and casually than others. Our children see and hear everything. Even when you have to tell them 10 times to clean up after themselves. Trust me, they heard you all 10 times. Maybe it's not that they are outright rebelling, but just so overburdened and distracted by all the devices you allow them to worship. After all, what is cleaning up after themselves going to do to change the world into a better place? What is cleaning up after themselves going to do to help with the constant anxiety of their parents, who are endlessly fretting about this or that? Don't forget our children are extremely empathic. We can say what we want, but they are reading our underlying thoughts, emotions, and motives. Even if they don't know exactly what that might be, they know we are hypocritical creatures that are doing our best to survive every day. So if your children hear you throwing around the phrase, I love you, in regards to these fleeting material possessions like your car, new purse, restaurant, etc., what do you think runs through their mind when you happen to throw that phrase at them every night before bed? Or once a week when you feel not as stressed? Or when they do something that takes stress off of you? I will tell you exactly what goes through their minds, because this has always been something I've been very consciously aware of and have a very good recollection of, even as a child. You see, my mother was an intense woman. She would get excited easily over material things and caught up in the moment, and express herself constantly with a very dramatic, I love that, fill in the blank. Well, let's take a particular movie she said she loved, for example. Me, being a child, would see how much joy this entertainment brought her, the state of bliss and excitement she would be in when expressing such emotion. She would immerse herself in it, and for the next hour and a half of an otherwise miserable life, she would appear to be happy to be alive. Her mood would lift, and maybe some things she normally would freak out and beat or punish me for would be dismissed quickly with the option of fixing the mistake with no further punishment. Like, let's say, a drink spilt, or a piece of trash was left out, or the chores could wait until after we all enjoyed the entertainment together. For me, it wasn't so much enjoying the entertainment as it was the brief reprieve of not being in a hurricane of her volatile emotions. Now let's look at the context of this phrase when it would be directed towards me. My mother constantly told me she loved me. When I would help out. When I would obey without question. Concede to her will and wishes, etc. I was taught that her love for me was conditional. It was a tool she used for compliance or to encourage certain behavior that made her life easier. Love was never a pure, warm feeling in my home. It was something that carried with it heavy baggage. It was a loaded gun with which my mother would slay dragons. When it was pointed in my direction, I would wince. The definition of wince is Give a slight involuntary grimace or shrinking movement of the body out of, or in anticipation of, pain or distress. My childhood would have been just slightly less stressful had my mother never uttered those words at all. So how does it affect a child to hear their parents say they love their car and then turn around and that evening tell them before bed, I love you? Let your critical thinking kick in. It means nothing to their heart. To their brain, it tells them they are at least in your good favor for the moment. That at least they are still on that narrow path of your acceptance. They can at least sleep that night with one less stress. They at least feel the illusory safety they know comes and goes at a moment's notice with that phrase. But at least for this moment, it's here. You see, you must understand that children are not bamboozled and hoodwinked by your words. They are extremely intuitive and intelligent. They can feel your emotions and true meaning behind the shallow utterances that spew forth so effortlessly from between the lying hypocritical hole in your face. They have been paying attention to every invisible connection of words, situations, emotions that is entangled in our interactions. Children hold on to this until our sick environments get the best of them, and they completely sell out to the dark side and shut down their empathy and longing for the truth after years of holding on. It just seems hopeless to hold on to a concept that causes so much cognitive dissonance, especially when every mode of control is telling them otherwise. If you don't think so, you are only lying to yourself. My kids know I love them, said every self-righteous, egotistic, lazy, narcissistic parent ever. I digress. Let's get back to the example of the car you love so much. When your kids hear you bragging about your car and telling friends, family, hell, even strangers how much you love your car, they keep a record in their mind. Now they watch you as there are rules for that precious chunk of steel and fiberglass. No feet on the seats. No open food or beverage containers. No playing basketball in the driveway unless it's parked safely in the garage with the door closed, etc. They watch as you won't dare park next to the cart return at a shopping center, and will definitely not park next to someone's old beater for fear they may, intentionally or not, dent or scratch your beautiful piece of machinery upon their entry into theirs. After all, it's apparent anyone who would drive a vehicle with a different colored fender that was obviously cheaply replaced has no love for their possession, so they certainly won't be as careful around your baby. Your child watches as you make the financial sacrifice of putting the best gas, oil, and other daily, weekly, monthly maintenance into it. Once a week, you will spend $15 to $20 at the automatic car wash because cleanliness is next to godliness. And God forbid this sleek machine gets any kind of dirt or blemish. You beam brightly at how well the shine on the tires is. For some materialistic consumers whose part-time job is parent, they will go so far as to name this inanimate object. Betsy was the most popular name for a vehicle I heard growing up. So I would imagine I have drawn a clear visual of what your children are associating with your thoughts, emotions, words, and actions, to understand what you mean when you say you love something. Now, how do they interpret that when they use this as a guideline for your love for them? What goes through their heads when they hear you bragging to strangers and parking the vehicle in the driveway after its weekly shine, deliberately so Bob next door will gaze upon it and drool with envy? They see that every compliment you receive lifts your spirits and produces a proud, beaming facial expression. So again, I ask, how do you think this makes the biological beings that you birthed into this shallow, materialistic slavery of an existence feel when they see how much a hunk of a machinery that to them is nothing more than a means to get from point A to point B means to you? What are they to think when, as the years pass, your love wanes and the all too familiar need for something new and shiny slowly takes over, and in 5 years the once beloved item of your affection that receives so much of your time and attention is traded in for a new model? The cycle repeating as your vigor for life is renewed and the utter excitement of making a new purchase is realized. They watch as you carefully plan for months prior, spending countless hours choosing color, trim packages, and all other various options to customize your baby just the way you want it, perfectly assembled just for you. Contemplate for a long moment how a child interprets the fact that you are unable to customize them. Hell, you couldn't even choose the sex. More or less things like height, weight, IQ, ability to conform to social and economic standards, etc., etc. What flood of emotions they must have when realizing that you just had to accept them without all the bells and whistles and luxury options to choose from. Maybe they look through pictures and see how you accessorize them after birth, with a car seat and stroller that made you seem important. Maybe you spent $40 on a pair of shoes for them that only fit for a couple months, and they grew out of before they could even crawl, more or less stand up in them. Most babies hate having shoes put on their feet, but that doesn't matter to the egotistical narcissist. They will spend 10 minutes shoving a ridiculous, useless accessory onto a squirming, uncomfortable baby prior to going for a walk in the neighborhood at a high traffic time when everyone is home so they can show off to their peers how they accessorize their baby today. It's not just accessories that matter to these caretakers. It is also development. The child is boring to talk about until it reaches its next milestone in cognitive or physical achievements. Some parents are embarrassed to even address that issue until little Johnny catches up in development, or will go so far as to remark in disdain his slow progression. I can already hear some parents, including my narcissistic mother, saying, "That's not true. I was always swooning over my baby, developmentally slow or not." Okay, well, you get a participation award. Does that satisfy your bruised ego? My point here being, did you really love your child? Did you really show through thoughts, emotions, words, and actions a true, unselfish, all-encompassing love for your child? Can you honestly say that without your unyielding attention and care, your child would not have blossomed into the amazing biological spirit-driven being he or she is? Did you provide the safe space and liberty needed for the healthy environment this child required to realize its true, authentic self? Let's be real honest here. Let's not lash out and respond emotionally, hoping it will negate the facts. Maybe we can clear up some cognitive dissonance by going over some facts. Okay, let's establish something first. Babies need nothing, and I mean nothing, from the giants that birthed it into this world other than safety, ease, comfort, respect, liberty, sanity, and veracity, which is truth. In short, this is a safe space. This is all that is required for the biological system to fully mature and develop. Second point that needs to be established. Babies are born whole. They are born knowledgeable, pure, empathic, and they are all-encompassing, peaceful, and loving beings. This is wholeness. This is humanity. Life is simple and not superfluous. Superfluous being any quality or characteristic outside of what is mentioned above. Don't get this twisted. Wholeness is not a diploma, a certificate of merit, a high-paying job, rigorous discipline, to be goal-oriented, driven to succeed, materially abundant, socially accepted, religious, law-abiding, compliant, obedient, subservient, good at taking tests, doing chores, helping out, etc. These are all things that the slave matrix has taught you through your abusive slave-minded parents and was taught to them by their abusive slave-minded parents, and they were taught as well by their parents. This is what is called superfluous. These things are all a construct and part of a system that has kept families for generations enslaved and making sure their offspring remains in that state, a state of perpetual lack, fear, and desire. Okay, now that we have established what is the responsibility of a parent, we will repeat it here again to make sure we are all on the same page. The responsibility of a parent is to provide the child with safety, ease, and comfort, and surround them with respect, liberty, sanity, and veracity. That is all that is required. Please understand I am referring to the experience in the United Slave States of America. Maybe it's the same in your country, maybe not. But the idea as a whole should be considered not just because a certain detail doesn't pertain to your exact situation should this be dismissed. I am simply establishing the fact that we as parents are not parenting responsibly. Period. Most children are born in a hospital. This is an unimaginably traumatic start to life. The mother is usually induced with a relaxing agent injected directly into her spine. The need for this being how uncomfortable and unfamiliar a place to give birth as a bright cement-blocked room with cold floors and a hard metal bed in the presence of strangers. We won't even go into the fact of all the stressors prior to birth, i.e., financial woes, relationship nightmares, having shitty support systems, eating toxic processed food, ingesting poisonous music, movies, literatures, ideas, worries, etc., and on and on. You can see from that alone, the stage has already been set for absolute chaos once a new life is introduced to the mix. Getting back to the baby's experience. It spent 9 months in an enclosed system, wrapped tightly and warmly in a fluid that kept it comfortable and stable, being nourished directly through a tube from the mother into its belly button, receiving only that which was necessary for direct communication and connection with its mother. Contrast this with upon its sliding between the mother's legs is met with the cold, unfamiliar hands of a self-important, egotistic doctor who is simply repeating a process he does 12 times a day and cares only to hurriedly get on to the next delivery. Why does this matter? Because babies are empathic and can feel all these anxieties. The doctor immediately cuts the connecting cord between the mother and child, severed immediately and with no emotion. As soon as this part of the process is quickly finished, the baby is passed from nurse to nurse as they each take turns. The first will hang the baby upside down and beat on it if the baby has fluid stuck in its throat and struggling to breathe. Once cleared, it will be handed to the next stranger who will take a cloth and rub the baby's skin for the first time. This being not done gently with care and compassion, but with a hurried exuberance as this is a production line and the show must go on. The next will place it in a metal basket to get the official weight, which is to be documented on its certificate of slavery. She will then ask another stranger for help in stretching out the heretofore fetal position child so they can document how tall this child is. All this will be used in the next few years as its growth is carefully monitored by pediatric agents of the state who will gladly prescribe toxic formulas and concoctions the state deems as necessary should the child not be able to keep pace with its peers, as according to the data compiled by these industries. All this part of the programming of compliance and fitting into abnormal, abusive social structures. Also, this cannot go without mention. Perhaps the most blatantly obvious physical thing we do, which is the same thing done for livestock, etc. Upon birth, we name, number, and catalog this precious human into a federal database where it will be tracked and everything it does recorded and accounted for. This is an in-your-face slavery system of operation that cannot be denied. Finally, the last nurse will wrap the baby tight and lay the child on the mother's chest, where the infant finally starts to calm as it is finally embraced by a familiar warmth. But this brief interlude to its distressing situation only lasts for a few minutes at most, as it is extremely important that the science of separation start immediately. The mother deserves it, after all. Look how she sacrificed herself for 9 months for this ungrateful being that is now going to carry with it a debt to its parents that will never be fully repaid. So, after a fleeting moment of safety and warmth with the mother, the baby is now placed in a bright cart and wheeled far away in another bright cement-blocked room. Only now it is on its own, separated by the walls of the carrier it was placed in, only being able to stare blindly at the bright lights above. It is placed in a room with sometimes dozens of other babies, all screaming. It reminds me of how the Christian Bible describes hell, the never-ending crying and gnashing of teeth. Minus the teeth, of course. But holy shit, that has to be scary as all get out, coming right from a tight, warm, comfortable place inside of the mother to now this. Baby hell. And this is all within the first 30 to 60 minutes of birth. We went over what is required of the parents to responsibly care for their baby. Does any of this resemble the attributes of a proper environment or loving surroundings? Do you detect any sense of ease, comfort, safety, respect, sanity, or liberty in any of this? If your only excuse is, well, that's how babies are born, then you should hang your head in shame. You are so lost in the sauce and will justify anything you do because you are on survival slave programming. You justify it because your parents did the same to you and they told you they loved you. So you are just passing down the love, right? How can you be to blame when this is the only way you have known? I am not passing judgment. I am merely pointing out the obvious facts of the matter. Just because you fucked up doesn't mean it's time to make excuses. Believe me, all your children want is an acknowledgement of your absolute failure in providing them with what they needed, and instead being a party to their abuse and enslavement. You have no idea how healing that would be for them to hear that you failed to protect them in such a vital beginning to their existence. Okay, so let's now get to the second point. This means that your baby was born whole. This meaning they are born knowledgeable, pure, empathic, and they are beings of all-encompassing peace and love. We will fast forward to the arrival at home. What kind of environment are they being brought to? Let me guess. The environment into which you bring them is riddled with fear, lack, worry, confusion, lies, manipulations, illusions, constructs, status and virtue signaling, material and consumption of goods, desire, never being enough and needing a savior or whatever outside authority for guidance, and on and on and on. Sound familiar? No? Oh, you are a proper caretaker, huh? Let's go through some scenarios and see if any of these abusive measures were carried out by you. Did you take your baby to a state-mandated agency and get heavy metals injected into them? How about when they weren't keeping up with the pace of development as dictated by the state? Did you follow the recommendations by the pediatrician to supplement with poisonous formulas? Did you teach your baby how to sleep by itself because it was too stressful having it cling to you for the first 2 or 3 years? This point being very abusive, as all babies want is that closeness and connection with its mother and father. Did you teach your baby how to eat? This one also being extremely abusive as well. Babies fight to not ingest the poisonous shit we shove down their throats. They do everything they can to resist. They put their hands up. They move their heads violently from side to side, refusing to open their mouths. And when you plug their nose and place it in their mouth, they spit it out. But of course, this makes you very angry, and you renew your efforts with intense vigor, because if you don't teach them how to eat, how will they survive? This is straight out abuse. Could you imagine being in a public place and seeing parents gang up on their 10-year-old, forcing food down his throat? No, that's why this abusive programming must start early. Fighting a baby is not nearly as attention-grabbing as fighting a 10-year-old that can actually tell their abuser to go to hell. The baby is doing everything it can to communicate its discomfort and disease. Disease being dis-ease, not at ease. This innocent being is trying to communicate desperately, in every way it possibly can, that you are harming it. These obvious signs of abuse go unnoticed because the only thing that matters is compliance. That's what you were taught, and what makes this little shit thinks he's any better than you. He will comply. You will make sure of it. Okay, let's fast forward. We do live in a slave society, and most parents do not have the luxury of not having to work. So at what age did you teach the child to spend upwards of 10 hours a day with a stranger while you went to slave away to keep a roof over your heads and the lights on? Let's say a year and a half. How long did it take that child to adapt to being now even more separated from the ones who say they love him? How badly was the child treated during this time? How long did they scream and cry, staring in horror at the door, hoping its mother and father would relent and come back to rescue it? Or were they fine as long as the caretaker plopped them in front of some TV programming that they had become accustomed to because you had started that brainwashing at just a couple months? Oh yes, you realized very early the power of the television as you would place the baby in a bouncer or some other kind of self-soothing chair and turn on the bright hypnotizing lights and sounds of a program that was probably written and directed by a pedophile, as it is now coming out that is all of the entertainment industry, and they especially enjoy participating in the mind control of children. The TV is such an integral part of you raising your kids, you couldn't imagine bearing parenthood without the assistance of these abusive, mind-altering programs. If you want to blow me off and act like this is a non sequitur, then that is just a blatant display of your ignorance and complete lack of acceptance of your responsibilities. The powers that be have known since the inception of such a hypnotizing device that once sat in front of a screen, your mind goes into alpha waves, which is the programmable state of your brain where all critical thinking is shut down and you are soaking the mind control in like a sponge. Television was created as a propaganda tool for the government's war efforts. Nothing has changed as it is still used for those purposes to this day. Only now the war is for your mind. They want a dumbed down, non-thinking populace that is obedient and compliant. And God be damned, you will make sure your child is an obedient, mindless minion of the state. Okay, let's fast forward to the age of 5. The fact that a child can make it this far in these toxic environments is a testament to the unbelievable resilience of the biological organism. The only way this is accomplished is because the brain has a mechanism whereby it creates splits in order to survive the fight or flight response. Seeing how it can neither fight nor run away when it is born into the abuse. It is already just a tiny part of its original authentic self by the time it can walk. But this is a deep subject that deserves a more thorough examination, so we will leave it rest at that for now. So at 5 years old, you, being the loving parent you are, have now enrolled this partial zombie you have helped to create into compulsory state indoctrination centers. Compulsory meaning the state requires the indoctrination, and your child will attend, and you, being the handler of this child for the state, will make sure of it. Oh, so you decide to homeschool. Okay, well, the state will still make sure you are teaching this being the same brainwashing subjects that are taught in their schools that resemble prisons. So no, you are not off the hook. Also, your child will be injected with as many heavy toxic metals as required by the state and according to schedule. Again, you ensure your child begins the state indoctrination system at 5 years old. Here, they will be tested for compliance daily for the next 12 years. Should your child show signs of apathy for the cold, superfluous knowledge they try shoving into his mind, or should he show signs of anxiety having to sit still and obey for 8 hours a day, the system has an answer for that. They will call you in for a meeting where they will explain that Johnny has a mental disorder. Oh, but don't fret. They have the answer. They always have the answer. Problem, reaction, solution. The solution? Toxic neurochemicals. Yes, you will be forced to now administer brain-numbing poison to this child in order to get it to be an obedient, group-thinking, compliant minion. If you argue, the state will simply remove the child from your supervision. It's as simple as that. So while all this abuse and brainwashing is being administered and the child is constantly being put into positions where it fears for its life, you are telling them that you love them. I do this for your own good, because I love you. How absolutely twisted and disgusting is that? So this is how we have been taught for generations what love is. This is what has been the real-life example we have passed on for generations of how to love and what love means. Not a pure love, mind you, but a sick, twisted, perverted meaning of the word. Love is reserved as a prize for those who are compliant and fall in line. Love is merely a 4-letter word of encouragement to keep making authority happy. Love is clingy and selfish, jealous and demanding with a heavy hand for falling out of line. Love is the complete giving up of authenticity and self and becoming one with the rest of the lemmings. Love is obedience to the abusive systems of control and not disturbing the peace of those who have lost the ability to think critically. Love is fluid and might be here today but gone tomorrow with the wind. Love is based on emotional states of those in charge, and if those tyrants are unhappy, well, you had better tread carefully and do everything you can to help extinguish the fire within their bellies. I can hear the brain-dead program zombies now. Oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Or, so sad you never got to experience love. Or, I pray Jesus' love saves you. Or any one of 1,000 different religious dogma quotes. These people are gaslighting themselves. These people are refusing to face the harsh truths and realities in this hell realm we find ourselves neighbors in. These people will fall back on mindless quotes like, "For God so loved the world," or "Jesus loves you so much he died for your sins," or "God is all-knowing and loves us so much." Yet this all-powerful, loving God allows billions of slaves and indescribable acts of suffering and torture to billions more throughout the world. These types of people are so lost in the sauce. I will have to dedicate a separate musing to this brainwashing, as that deserves its own dedicated writing. I will end this paragraph with those types are completely checked out of reality and are attempting to think positively out of a deep, dark abyss. And likely these people have experienced so much abuse and trauma that they are unable to face any of it, and their mind is stuck on the happy train to hell. In short, they are completely delusional. Again, this goes back to the trauma response in the brain. They are displaying Stockholm Syndrome due to the inability to face reality and cope with the massive amount of cognitive dissonance this type of abuse imbues to the mind. So in summary, none of us have a clue what love is. When we have never been shown love, how could we? We may act like we do. Some will say, I give money, time, assistance to those in need, or to this organization or to the other. This is all martyrdom and virtue signaling. You cannot love others until first you remember how to love yourself. You cannot love yourself until you heal from the trauma and abuse that is as pervasive in today's society as the confusion that comes along with it. If you have not come to terms with what this hell realm is and taken the immense amount of effort and time to heal and walk in spirit, then you have no clue what love is. In order to truly experience love, you would have to invest that time in yourself. And when you realize you have been living a lie, it will almost break you. I am personally over a year into my healing and constantly having to prove to myself by aligning my thoughts, words, and actions that I truly do love myself. I have been doing this by daily choosing to put myself first and not allowing anything to interrupt or stop my healing process. This is by far the hardest thing I've ever done in a life filled with immense challenges that have come one after the other. The things I have had to come to terms with and admit are harsh realities that have shook and crumbled the very foundation upon which I had built a life of lies. Without taking the responsibility and facing these truths, I would have died in my sea of lies, having lived in a fantasy that never allowed me to experience love. Instead, I gave it all up. All the temporary comfort and conveniences, all the feel-good toxic positivity, all the hoping and wishing there was something that loved me, all the gaslighting and ego building. I had to dismantle the fortress that I had spent decades building. I had to drop the illusory veil that kept me comfortably ignorant. Remaining comfortable is not a sign of love. In fact, quite the opposite. Living in illusion is self-harm and the complete opposite of love. I would describe it as lusting after love. So this is just a quick overview of many examples of the toxic type of love we have been perpetuating through the generations. Until someone breaks these generational curses, the family system is nothing more than a weak, sick, twisted, illusory version of what it was and what we verbalize it is. The gaslighting needs to stop, as that is just adding to the confusion and parlaying the miserable, toxic outcomes further down the line. Not recognizing and accepting and addressing these issues, and instead continuing to act like everything is fine, when clearly it is not, is an obvious sign of a world gone mad. Billions of scared children in adult suits playing house. We need to stand up individually and account for our wrongs and tell the truth. We must face our demons if our kids are to have any chance of figuring out what love is. We must think critically. We must reclaim our authority from those who are clearly keeping us in perpetual states of fear and confusion. We must be courageous. We must tell the truth. Only then will we begin to understand the true meaning of this four-letter word we so casually throw around. Will you be courageous?